The Nintendo DS holds a special place in gaming history, praised for its innovation, accessibility, and massive library of titles. But beneath its family-friendly image lies a lesser-known side of the story. Throughout its lifespan, the DS was home to a number of games that challenged expectations, sparked controversy, and stirred debate among players, parents, and critics alike. From culinary-sensitive subjects to unexpected levels of violence and mature themes, these titles pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable on a Nintendo platform. In this episode, we take a look at the most controversial games ever to appear on the Nintendo DS, with 10 controversial Nintendo DS games. Brain Age: Train Your Brain. Brain Age: Train Your Brain launched in 2005. It was marketed as a revolutionary way to keep your mind sharp through daily mental exercises. Based on the work of Japanese neuroscience Dr. Ryuta Kawashima, the game was positioned as both educational and therapeutic, offering a variety of puzzles, math problems, and memory challenges to stimulate different areas of the brain. The concept caught on quickly, especially among older adults and casual gamers, who saw it not just as entertainment, but as a tool for mental wellness. The title became a massive commercial success, helping Nintendo tap into a non-traditional gaming audience. But beneath the surface of its brain-boosting promises, could a video game really improve cognitive function, or was it all just marketing hype? The controversy began to grow as scientists, psychologists, and medical professionals the validity of the claims made by Brain Age and similar brain training programs. While the game proudly cited Dr. Kawashima's research, critics argued that the studies behind it were either too narrow or lacked peer-reviewed rigor. Independent research began to emerge suggesting that any improvements players experienced were limited to the task within the game itself, with little evidence of broader cognitive enhancement. In 2014, the UK's Advertising Standards Authority even banned certain brain training ads for misleading claims. While Nintendo never outright stated that Brain Age could prevent dementia or significantly raise intelligence, its marketing often walked a fine line, especially in Japan and Europe, where the game was frequently tied to health and aging narratives. This raised ethical concerns about exploiting older demographics and creating false hope through gamified science. As a result, Brain Age became an unlikely lightning rod in the conversation about how far video games could go when making claims about health, science, and the human mind. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon arrived on the Nintendo DS in 2008, and it was more than just another entry in the long-running strategy RPG series. It was a remake of the very first Fire Emblem game, released in Japan in 1990. For many Western players, this was their first introduction to Marth's origin story, a foundational piece of Fire Emblem lore that had only previously been hinted at in games like Super Smash Bros. But while longtime fans were excited to finally experience the game that started it all, Shadow Dragon sparked controversy for its minimal storytelling, lack of character development, and brutally unforgiving gameplay. Critics and fans alike questioned whether the remake was too faithful to the original, preserving outdated design choices that clashed with modern expectations. One of the most debated features was the game's permadeath system, where fallen units were gone for good, a series staple, but one that felt particularly punishing in a game that offered little narrative incentive to connect with its large cast of characters. What added fuel to the fire was the introduction of the reclassing system, which allowed players to change a unit's class at will, something unheard of in earlier titles. While some welcomed the added flexibility, many fans viewed it as a betrayal of the series' identity, reducing the uniqueness of individual characters and undermining the strategic core of the game. Additionally, Shadow Dragon introduced a controversial mechanic that required players to sacrifice units early on to unlock bonus chapters, essentially encouraging self-sabotage to access all the content. This design choice frustrated many as it conflicted with the emotional weight that permadeath was supposed to carry. The game also received criticism for its sparse presentation, especially compared to the vibrant character-driven entries that had come before it, like Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones and Path of Radiance. In the eyes of many players, Shadow Dragon felt cold, clinical, and stripped down, a remake that honored its roots, but at the cost of what made the series resonate with fans in the first place. Kirby Canvas Curse. When Kirby Canvas Curse hit the Nintendo DS in 2005, it marked a bold departure from the traditional Kirby formula. Instead of the familiar platforming mechanics and copy abilities controlled by buttons, ask players to guide a rolling, ball-shaped Kirby entirely using the stylus and touchscreen. This radical shift divided longtime fans. Some praised the game's creative approach, calling it a brilliant showcase of what the DS could do. Others saw it as a gimmick that sacrificed Kirby's identity in favor of hardware experimentation. The lack of direct control over Kirby, a character known for his responsiveness and fluidity, frustrated traditionalists who felt alienated by the new mechanics. To them, Canvas Curse felt like a tech demo masquerading as a mainline entry, and a betrayal of what made the Kirby series accessible and fun. Beyond the gameplay changes, there was also a cultural conversation happening around Nintendo's broader strategy during this era. Critics pointed to Canvas Curse as a symbol of Nintendo's shift toward casual audiences, an experimental, stylus-heavy title that prioritized novelty over depth. Hardcore players who had grown up with the company's more conventional titles saw this as the beginning of a larger trend, one that would later define the Wii era. Some even argued that Canvas Curse helped usher in a wave of touchscreen-based games that relied too heavily on unconventional control schemes, often at the expense of precision and player agency. While the game would go on to receive critical acclaim and influence later DS titles, its initial reception was mixed. To some, it was a misunderstood masterpiece. To others, it was an early sign that Nintendo was leaving its core fans behind in pursuit of broader appeal.
Beat agents are at your service.
Elite Beat Agents. Elite Beat Agents launched in 2006 and quickly gained a cult following for its unique rhythm-based gameplay, infectious soundtrack, and over-the-top sense of humor. The game was completely reimagined for Western audiences, but it was that very localization process that stirred controversy. Instead of bringing over the original Japanese version wholesale, Nintendo opted to create a culturally distinct product tailored to American taste. The quirky Japanese cheer squad was replaced with a trio of government-style agents of rhythm, and the heartfelt Japanese stories were rewritten with exaggerated, sometimes absurd, Western scenarios. While many fans loved the campy comic book feel of Elite Beat Agents, others criticized it for watering down or erasing the emotional core that made the original so memorable. For purists and fans of Japanese culture, the localization felt less like an adaptation and more like cultural sanitization. Beyond the localization debate, Elite Beat Agents also faced backlash for some of its more unexpected and emotionally charged storylines. One level in particular, featuring a recently deceased father watching over his grieving wife and daughter, caught many players off guard. Set to Chicago's "You're the Inspiration," the scene was surprisingly somber and struck a deep emotional chord. But it also raised eyebrows about the appropriateness of such themes in otherwise lighthearted, cartoonish games. Critics and parents questioned whether the game's tonal shifts were too abrupt, or if its handling of serious topics felt manipulative within the context of a rhythm game. Others felt the game's comedic tone undercut its more serious moments, making it hard to know how certain stories were meant to be interpreted. Despite its praise for creativity and innovation, Elite Beat Agents remains a polarizing title, revered for its originality but scrutinized for its tonal whiplash and cultural overhaul. Sonic Rush. Sonic Rush debuted on the Nintendo DS in 2005, and it was widely celebrated for blending high-speed 2D gameplay with 3D character models, breathing new life into the Sonic franchise after a string of mixed reviews on home consoles. However, despite its strong reception, Sonic Rush was not without controversy, particularly surrounding its gameplay philosophy, and how it reinforced a growing divide among Sonic fans. The game heavily emphasized speed and momentum, often pushing players to blast through levels at breakneck speed with minimal platforming or exploration. While some fans loved this return to fast, flashy action, others criticized it for stripping away the nuanced level design and skill-based gameplay that had defined Sonic's early Genesis-era roots. The boost-to-win mechanic, where players could repeatedly blast forward with little resistance, became the sticking point, raising concerns that the series was sacrificing depth for spectacle. This debate would only intensify in later Sonic titles that borrow from Rush's formula, with many pointing to this game as the origin of a design philosophy that prioritized visual speed over meaningful gameplay interaction. Another point of controversy centered on the introduction of Blaze the Cat, a new character who played a prominent role in Sonic Rush's dual character structure and story. While Blaze would eventually gain popularity, her debut was met with confusion and criticism from segments of the fanbase who were already wary of Sega's expanding Sonic universe. Following years of criticism over introducing too many side characters like Big the Cat, Cream the Rabbit, and others, some fans viewed Blaze as yet another unnecessary addition. Her inclusion ignited the ongoing discourse about character bloat in the Sonic series, with detractors arguing that Sega should focus on refining the core gameplay and cast rather than constantly introducing new faces. Additionally, the game's anime-inspired cutscenes and dialogue, which leaned heavily into melodrama, clashed with the fans who preferred the more minimal, attitude-driven tone of earlier Sonic entries. While Sonic Rush is often remembered fondly for its stylish presentation and energetic soundtrack, it quietly became a flashpoint for deeper disagreements about the direction of the Sonic franchise, disagreements that still echo within the fan community today. Before we move on with our list, I'd love to know what you think so far. Sound off in the comments below if you're enjoying this video. And while you're down there, be sure to hit the like button. It helps out more than you know. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Okay, back to the list. Another Code: Two Memories. Another Code: Two Memories launched on the DS in 2005, and it immediately stood out in a market saturated with platformers and action-heavy franchises. Developed by Sing and published by Nintendo, this narrative-driven adventure game introduced players to a quiet, contemplative experience centered around memory, family, and emotional exploration. While many praise its atmospheric storytelling and innovative use of the DS hardware, such as closing the console to solve puzzles, the game sparked controversy due to its pacing and narrative direction, particularly in Western markets. Critics and players in North America felt that its slower, introspective gameplay clashed with the expectations typically set by Nintendo's handheld offerings. Some accused the game of being too short and lacking replay value, while others saw its minimalistic gameplay mechanics as a sign of poor design rather than deliberate creative choice. This polarized reaction led to debates over what constitutes a worthy game and whether narrative-first experiences had a place on a system widely marketed to younger audiences and fans of fast-paced titles. The controversy deepened due to its regional disparities in the game's reception and content localization. In its original Japanese and European release, Another Code received broader critical appreciation for its emotional maturity and willingness to tackle themes like grief, loss, and parental estrangement. However, the North American version underwent several localization changes, including some toned-down emotional nuance and dialogue depth, arguably dulling the game's impact. Moreover, the cancellation of the sequel, Another Code R for the Wii in North America, despite being released in Europe and Japan, reignited controversy among fans who felt the original game had been unfairly maligned by Western critics. This led to a growing cult following that viewed the game as misunderstood and ahead of its time. The title is now often cited in retrospective discussions about early narrative games on handheld systems and has gained renewed attention with the 2024 remake, which brought the debate full circle. Was another code dismissed too quickly? And does it now finally deserve the recognition it was denied 2 decades ago? Hotel Dusk, Room 215. Hotel Dusk, Room 215, released in 2007 for the Nintendo DS, and was a bold experiment in storytelling, art direction, and player interaction. Developed by Sing, the same studio behind Another Code, the game embraced a noir-inspired aesthetic and wrapped players in a slow-burning, character-driven mystery. At its core was Kyle Hyde, a former detective with a troubled past, navigating a series of cryptic conversations and puzzles within the eerie confines of a 1970s Los Angeles motel. While it was praised for its mature narrative and unique rotoscoped art style, Hotel Dusk also sparked controversy for precisely those reasons. Critics argued that its sluggish pacing, extensive dialogue sequences, and minimal interactivity made it feel more like a visual novel than a proper DS game. In a gaming landscape dominated by touch-driven minigames, action-adventures, and platformers, some felt that Hotel Dusk was too cerebral, too niche, a title that misunderstood its audience. Detractors claimed it blurred the lines between gaming and reality in a way that left players feeling disconnected, especially those who expected gameplay to take center stage. Beyond its gameplay debates, Hotel Dusk faced a deeper controversy for its thematic content and tone, elements rarely seen on a Nintendo platform at the time. The game tackled subjects like depression, corporate corruption, trauma, and existential disillusionment, all wrapped in a melancholy atmosphere that clashed with the DS's otherwise family-friendly catalog. Some parents and commentators were taken aback by the title's willingness to let players navigate morally gray choices and uncover unsettling backstories that touched on suicide, deceit, and personal failure. This mature emotional complexity sparked debates about whether the DS, often marketed toward children and teens, was the right platform for such heavy material. The controversy only deepened when Hotel Dusk's commercial performance struggled in some regions, leading to an underwhelming rollout for its spiritual successor, Last Window: The Secret of Cape West, a game it never saw release in North America. Today, Hotel Dusk is often celebrated as a cult classic, remembered for taking risks that may have alienated mainstream players, but earned a loyal fan base who saw it as proof that handheld gaming could be artful, challenging, and deeply human. Touch Detective. Touch Detective launched for the Nintendo DS in 2006 and presented a quirky, interactive mystery adventure starring the eccentric detective Mackenzie and her ghostly sidekick Fungi. The game's premise, a point-and-click detective story set in a bizarre, almost surreal world, offered something unique for a platform dominated by action-packed titles and simple puzzles. However, the game was met with controversy due to its unusual art style, bizarre humor, and often unsettling tone. While some players appreciated its off-beat charm and darkly comedic atmosphere, others found its quirky design and storylines disorienting, with some even arguing that it bordered on being too strange or uncomfortable. The game's surreal dialogue and abstract puzzles led to mixed reviews, as many felt its humor, while quirky, was too niche and inaccessible to a wide audience. The puzzle-solving mechanics were also criticized for being overly obscure, leaving players frustrated with their inability to progress through the game without resorting to a guide. More importantly, Touch Detective came under fire for its sometimes disturbing content, which sat uneasily with the game's intended family-friendly appeal. The strange, almost eerie undertones, particularly in the darker sections of the story, raised concern about its suitability for younger audiences. The character designs, while cute and cartoonish on the surface, often featured unsettling expressions or odd behaviors that made players question the game's tone. The plot itself involved themes of loss, mystery, and a touch of morbidity, which were presented in a lighthearted, almost casual manner. This strange juxtaposition between dark subject matter and the game's seemingly playful exterior made some players uncomfortable, and led to debate about whether it was appropriate for children or if it was too complex for younger audiences to fully appreciate. Touch Detective became one of those niche titles that resonated with the particular subset of gamers, but its strange balance of humor, mystery, and unsettling visuals left many unsure of its target audience, creating a polarized response in the DS community. Magical Starsign. Magical Starsign was released on the Nintendo DS in 2005, and it was presented as a whimsical, traditional turn-based RPG with a colorful, lighthearted fantasy story. The game, developed by Brownie Brown and published by Nintendo, followed a group of young students at a magical academy who set off on an adventure to rescue their teacher. Despite its promising premise and charming art style, Magical Starsign quickly drew criticism for its lackluster gameplay mechanics and overly simplistic design, which many felt didn't live up to the standards set by other RPGs on the DS. While the game's visuals were praised for their vibrant, cartoonish charm, the overall gameplay was considered shallow, with combat systems that felt repetitive and storylines that lacked depth. Many players expected a more intricate RPG experience, but were left disappointed by the absence of meaningful character development or narrative weight, which made the overall experience feel superficial and forgettable. However, what really fueled the controversy surrounding Magical Starsign was its controversial handling of the game's magical and mystical themes. The use of astrology as a central element in the story, where characters are divided based on zodiac signs, was seen by some as a gimmick that diluted the magic of the game's fantasy setting. Critics argued that this reliance on astrology felt forced and out of place in a game that had so much potential to build on a unique, magical world. Some players found the astrological references distracting and trivializing, especially since the game's story seemed to hinge on them for character development and plot progression. Beyond that, the game's overall tone was a point of contention. While the art design and character interactions leaned heavily into a light, fun aesthetic, there were moments of forced humor and awkward pacing that left players wondering whether Magical Starsign was intended for younger audiences or more seasoned RPG fans. As a result, Magical Starsign was widely viewed as a missed opportunity for a more serious and engaging magical RPG, leaving it a divisive entry in Nintendo's library that struggled to find a true fanbase. The Legend of Zelda: Phantom Hourglass. Phantom Hourglass launched on the Nintendo DS in 2007, and it was celebrated by many critics for bringing the beloved franchise into a new era of touchscreen gaming. But despite strong initial praise, the game quickly became a flashpoint of controversy among longtime fans due to its radical departure from traditional control schemes. Rather than using the D-pad and buttons for movement and combat, Phantom Hourglass required players to control Link entirely using the stylus, tapping to move, slashing to attack, and drawing paths for the boomerang and other tools. While some praised the innovation, many fans found the controls imprecise, awkward, and frustrating, especially during fast-paced battles or puzzle solving under pressure. The touchscreen gimmick, while novel at first, was seen by critics of the game as a forced utilization of the DS hardware, rather than a naturally integrated feature. This led to a broader debate about whether Nintendo was sacrificing the depth and precision of its classic gameplay in favor of experimental input methods. Another source of frustration, and perhaps the most frequently cited controversy, was the game's central dungeon mechanic, the Temple of the Ocean King. Players were required to revisit this dungeon multiple times throughout the story, each time unlocking slightly deeper areas with new acquired abilities. While the temple introduced stealth elements and a time-based challenge via the titular Phantom Hourglass,
Many players criticize this repetitive structure as tedious and needlessly punishing. Progressing through the temple meant redoing many of the same floors, often under pressure from the constantly depleting Hourglass timer, which created a sense of urgency but also burnout. Even die-hard Zelda fans, known for their patience with complex dungeon designs, grew weary of the forced repetition and backtracking. What should have been an epic evolving dungeon, feeling like a chore-like padding to many. This divisive design choice sparked discussions about how far the series could stray from its roots in pursuit of innovation, and whether Phantom Hourglass represented bold creativity or a misstep in the franchise's evolution. The Nintendo DS was a groundbreaking system that opened the door for innovation, creativity, and experimentation. But with that bold spirit came plenty of controversy. From unorthodox control schemes and divisive art style to tonal whiplash and polarizing game choices. These titles pushed boundaries in ways that sparked fierce debate among players and critics alike. Whether you loved them for their risks or questioned the directions they took, there's no denying these games helped define the unique, unpredictable legacy of the DS. In a library filled with unforgettable classics, it's the controversial titles that remind us how gaming isn't just about fun, it's also about challenging expectations and daring to be different. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. What are your thoughts on the games on this list? Let me know. I personally, out of all the games on this list, the one I resonate with the most is Phantom Hourglass. I was so excited for that game, and then when I actually played it, it was just a huge disappointment. It's probably my least favorite Zelda game. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. Anything in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't, that other button seems to work pretty well too. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing for a plethora of gaming related content, including but not limited to controversial games. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.